What is the most dangerous profession in your opinion? Maybe it's being a police officer, maybe it's serving in the army, or maybe it's being a boxer, a fighter, or a relentless journalist. Every profession has its downsides, and some can also be unexpected. Imagine walking out of the door and not even knowing whether you'll live to see the next day or not. But I'm sure that no one would assume that acting could be a lethal profession. It's demanding, sure, but dangerous? Not usually. 44-year-old actor and journalist Jeff Machado was also in the entertainment industry and was looking for a new role to make his mark in Stardom City. Well, he didn't get the role that he wanted. Instead, he disappeared from the face of the earth. His family, his friends, and everyone was worried about him because this was unlike Jeff. But everything came to a halt 4 months later when his body was found near an unusual house. Who had done this to Jeff? What was the motive? And most importantly, where's the perpetrator now? The case of Jeff Machado highlights the dark side of the entertainment industry, and it's piqued the interest of people all over the world after featuring on multiple Brazilian TV shows that dubbed this case an impressive story because of the cruel details. Welcome to True Crime Stories. If you're new here, I'm your host, Ty Knotts. I post new true crime documentaries every single week. No AI narrations, no unnecessary drama, just a victim with a story to tell. So if you're into that kind of thing, hit that subscribe button. It's completely free, and it just keeps you up to date with my future videos. Jefferson Machado da Costa, better known as Jeff Machado, was born on January 19, 1979 in Brazil. Jeff had a brother named Diego, and growing up, Jeff's mom Maria defined Jeff as passionate and artistic. Jeff, from a very young age, knew one thing. He wanted to be a TV star. Jeff had dreams of pursuing a career in acting, and he wanted to become a celebrity. So fast forward to 1997 when Jeff was 18 years old. He moved from his hometown of Santa Catarina and traveled to Rio de Janeiro. Rio de Janeiro was a stepping stone to begin Jeff's career. He thought that moving to a big city would help him get the exposure and opportunities that he needed to become an actor. In 2008, though, about 10 years later, Jeff decided that he wanted to try out something different, so he turned to the field of journalism and was decently successful. But Jeff's heart was still stuck on acting. Even though he wasn't there yet, Jeff knew that someday he would make it big. 6 years later, in 2014, Jeff tried his luck with acting and moved to Rio de Janeiro again, and this time he hit the jackpot. He was working on multiple small acting gigs, and soon his big break came in the form of a role in the famous 2022 Brazilian soap opera, Reis. Reis is a soap opera based on the Old Testament books of the Bible. Jeff had a small supporting role in this soap opera, and this became his ticket to TV fame. But even though Jeff was really happy about this opportunity, it still wasn't what he wanted. Jeff, like most aspiring stars, had dreams of bagging a lead role in a soap opera or a telenovela. He knew that this would be a long shot, but that didn't mean he stopped trying. During his time in Rio de Janeiro, Jeff always took time out of his day to talk to his family back in Santa Catarina. According to Jeff's mom, Maria, they talked on the phone almost daily. Jeff didn't text or throw an update here or there. He preferred to call his mom and brother as it was easier. Remember this detail because it comes back up later on. If there was one thing that Jeff loved as much or even more than acting and writing, it was dogs. Jeff lived on his own in Rio de Janeiro, and he loved dogs more than life itself. Jeff adopted not one, not two, and not three, but 8 setters. Those dogs were Jeff's life, and his number one priority was always his 4-legged companions. According to Maria, Jeff never left his dogs neglected, and even if he had to go somewhere for an acting or journalism gig, he would entrust the dogs to his closest friends. Jeff was truly a wonderful and compassionate person. Even though he was moderately famous, he wasn't the boastful or bashful type. Jeff, according to his peers, was very down to earth, and he was ready to help anyone as much as possible. He wasn't greedy and didn't let his conscience waver or get blindsided by money. Jeff was also very hardworking. If there was one thing people knew about Jeff, it was that he never gave up. Jeff knew that something better was waiting for him around the corner. But what Jeff didn't expect, not even in his wildest dreams, was that he would disappear. Just like that, no communication, no reaching out to anyone, and no news of where he might be. This was something that shook the entire entertainment industry in Brazil to its core. Jeff's last known communication was with his mom and brother on January 23rd of 2023. If you remember, Jeff would always talk to his mom daily without fail. But after January 23rd, when Maria was expecting Jeff to call her and fill her in on his day, the call never came. Now, initially Maria wasn't super worried because she knew about Jeff's hectic and unpredictable schedule. Acting gigs would pop up from anywhere and Jeff had to leave at a moment's notice. But what wasn't normal was Jeff not calling and informing her. Even if Jeff didn't call her, he would still let his family know where he was and what he was doing. So not hearing from Jeff in any way started to worry Maria a lot. Jeff's mom and brother Diego got even more worried when they started receiving text messages from Jeff. You would think that Jeff's family would finally settle down and let their worries melt away, but the texts only made them fearful for Jeff's life. See, the texts were very vague, and they didn't even sound like Jeff. Now, you might have noticed this already in a couple of cases, but there's a specific way a person talks during texting. The delivery, certain spelling, the use of emojis, etc. are different for every single person. But Diego and Maria knew that the person texting them, claiming to be Jeff, wasn't him. Also, what was even more bizarre was that whenever Maria or Diego tried to call Jeff, he wouldn't pick up. Something was definitely amiss. In one of the texts, when Diego and Maria asked Jeff to answer their calls, he would brush it off, saying that his speaker wasn't working because his phone fell into the toilet. Now, this would have been believable, but Maria knew that the person texting them wasn't Jeff. The person just didn't sound like her son. You know what they say, though, a mother's instinct is never wrong. And sadly, Maria's gut was right. Several other texts popped up from Jeff, in which he said that he'd be moving back to Sao Paulo for work. And when Maria asked about the dogs and who would take care of them, so-called Jeff replied by saying, "I'll leave the animals with my friends." Again, Maria found this very unsettling. First of all, Jeff sounded very detached in this text, and secondly, he would never just up and leave without ensuring that his dogs were in good hands. And if you remember, Jeff only trusted a few people with his pets. To make matters worse, the person sending the texts didn't refer to the dogs by name. Not even referring to them as dogs, they simply said the animals. And if you're a dog lover, dogs aren't addressed as just animals. This only solidified Maria's suspicions. Unfortunately, things only got worse from that point on, though. Maria and Diego got wind that Jeff's dogs were nowhere to be found. And now, they'd come to Rio de Janeiro to look for themselves. As Maria and Diego were making the trip from Santa Catarina to Rio de Janeiro, something else happened. Jeff's neighbor spotted his dogs on the streets, visibly malnourished, and tragically it also looked like they were being abused, which is just awful. It seemed as though someone had let the dogs out of the home, and now they were roaming around until random people either captured or abused them, making them suffer from starvation and dehydration. Luckily though, all the dogs were quickly located through animal tracking chips, and they were taken to an NGO, where they were finally being taken care of. According to NGO officials, Jeff's dogs were severely underfed, had injuries on their bodies, and they were very traumatized, which is just heartbreaking. These dogs came from one of the most loving homes imaginable, and now they were being treated like nothing more than pests. When Maria and Diego got news of the dogs, they were just as confused. Jeff, someone who adored his pets and made sure that they were comfortable and well taken care of, couldn't have possibly been the one to do this to his dogs. This only meant one thing. Something had happened to Jeff, and whoever was responsible forced the dogs to run from Jeff's house. Maria and Diego immediately got the authorities involved, and 44-year-old Jeff Machado was reported missing. The investigators were baffled by this case. Jeff Machado, a rising star and journalist, had suddenly disappeared. Jeff's disappearance also made local and international news, and everyone was on edge. It was all so weird and unsettling. Well, the police had work to do, and they had to start looking around for any clues that could lead them to Jeff. They started with Jeff's house in Campo Grande, and when it was searched, nothing seemed out of the ordinary, but there were a couple of things missing. Jeff's cash, his belongings, including his debit cards and car keys, weren't there, and a wooden chest was nowhere to be seen. This did not look good for investigators at all, but during their search they came to know about a significant occurrence. It was between Jeff and a person named Bruno de Souza Rodriguez. But who was this Bruno guy? Well, the Brazilian police asked Jeff's mom and brother, and they knew exactly who he was. Bruno and Jeff had known each other for over 4 years. Bruno was a 37-year-old former producer. He and Jeff knew each other, but they were more like acquaintances than friends. According to some sources, Bruno had approached Jeff sometime before his disappearance and promised him a contracted role in a telenovela in exchange for a large sum of money. But Bruno conveniently left out the part that he no longer even worked for that production company. Jeff, upon hearing this news, was over the moon, having no idea that Bruno, for some reason, was lying. See, at the time, Jeff hadn't landed any more roles after his work in Race, so he was very excited to finally get a chance to act again. Also, this was a producer that Jeff knew, so he genuinely thought it was the real deal. Bruno made it sound very legit and convinced Jeff that he would be able to get a contract with the broadcaster. This led to Bruno and Jeff meeting quite often. They'd often hold casual meetings at Bruno's rented residence in Campo Grande, which was about 12 miles from where Jeff lived. According to Bruno's neighbors, he'd renovated the house and was raising the front walls, and a lot of witnesses saw Jeff visiting the house often. At one point, a third male was also seen visiting the house, and he was later identified as Vinicius da Silva Braga, or simply Vinicius. He was a 29-year-old man who did odd jobs. He was a mason at one point, and had even worked in a bakery nearby, and at the time of the case, he and Jeff were very close. The investigators reached out to Bruno, as well as Vinicius, and they both admitted to seeing Jeff on the day that he disappeared. But Bruno, for some reason, was avoiding the media and Jeff's family, and he wasn't speaking with anyone. His version of events was that Jeff visited him, and they talked about the possible contract, and then he left. In fact, Bruno was almost angry at Jeff for allegedly ghosting him, as it made him look bad in front of his bosses, when he promised to get an actor for an upcoming telenovela. But the thing is, the detectives already knew that his supposed bosses had fired him back in 2018. Diego, Jeff's brother, was also very suspicious of Bruno, and he took it upon himself to personally visit him in Rio de Janeiro. They both went to Jeff's house, and Diego was left dumbstruck when he found that Bruno not only had Jeff's house keys, but his other belongings too. When Diego asked about those things, Bruno went on to say that it was Jeff who had given him these things for safekeeping. But it's safe to say that Diego didn't buy Bruno's ruse for 1 second. Around the same time, the Whereabouts Discovery Police Station was investigating Jeff's disappearance, and upon talking to the NGO officials who rescued Jeff's dogs, they quickly concluded that Jeff hadn't disappeared of his own free will, and rather, he was taken by force. Some friends of Jeff's soon came forward and told the detectives about a weird text message that they received from a man named Giovanni, and the text implied that Jeff had abandoned his dogs and moved away. But Jeff's friends knew that if he had any plans of these sorts, he would have told them, or at least his own family. As the investigators were further looking into Jeff's social media activity, they came across a couple of weird things. A day after Jeff disappeared, a picture was posted on his Instagram with the caption, "Re-energizing gratitude." The same thing happened again about a week later on February 2nd, and this time the caption read, "Restart gratitude." What was even more weird to Jeff's family and friends was the tone of the comments left on the posts. Again, they didn't sound like Jeff, and a lot of the replies from so-called Jeff had major spelling errors in them. In the same week, a typed letter was also posted on Jeff's social media, and it was a farewell of sorts. Jeff's friends and family were left feeling unsettled and very scared for Jeff, as almost 4 months had passed at that point, and there was still no sign of him. But in May of 2023, everything changed when the detectives searched a certain house, and they recovered something that confirmed everyone's worst nightmare, which was that Jeff Machado was no longer alive. The police searched none other than Bruno's rented house in the Campo Grande neighborhood, where they started digging up a specific area in the ground where cadaver dogs had alerted them. As they reached the 6-foot mark, they hit something hard. It was a layer of concrete. When that was removed, a chest emerged, and the detectives remembered it being the same as the one that was missing from Jeff's house. When the chest was opened, inside there was the lifeless and unclothed body of a man. The body was in a fetal position, with the arms and legs tied behind and a telephone cord wrapped around the neck. It was clear to the investigators that the cause of death was asphyxiation. When the body was taken for identification, it was tragically identified as 44-year-old Jeff Machado. It was also suggested that Jeff might have had intimate relations with someone before he lost his life, though it's unclear whether this would have been consensual or not. When Jeff's family was informed about his death, Maria lost all control of her emotions. For 4 long months, she'd waited for a miracle that Jeff was still alive. But this was not to be the case. Her hardworking, passionate, and caring son had been brutally murdered, and nothing could fill the gaping void in the Machado family after Jeff lost his life. The detectives were already suspicious of Bruno having had something to do with Jeff's disappearance. But now they were certain that he was the person behind Jeff's passing. According to the police, it seemed as though Jeff wasn't the only victim of Bruno's either. Apparently, Bruno had a habit of giving aspiring actors false hopes of landing a role in TV, soap operas, or telenovelas. But it was just a way of extorting money from his unsuspecting victims. After this discovery, Bruno had lawyered up, and this added even more suspicions from the police. Immediately, the police knew that they had to question Bruno and Vinicius, as they were the main suspects in Jeff's murder. Bruno was initially very uncooperative and denied having any involvement in Jeff's murder, but Vinicius started talking almost immediately, but he also didn't make it easy since his story kept changing. At first, Vinicius confessed to only moving and burying Jeff's body, but he was also very tight-lipped about other people being involved. At one point, Vinicius tried to blame another man named Marcelo and said that he was the one who ended Jeff's life, but the detectives saw right through that lie. According to the police, it was a way to just deter the investigation. In the end, before his arrest, Vinicius confessed that Bruno had, unfortunately, drugged and ended Jeff's life, and he admitted that he was an accomplice in hiding the body. But this story is far from over. On May 31st, both Bruno and Vinicius were indicted, and a day later, on June 1st, the Public Ministry of Rio de Janeiro asked for the arrest of both men. On June 2nd, Vinicius was arrested, but the same can't be said about Bruno, because after he got wind that the detectives were catching up to him, he fled. The police, wasting no time at all, directed Interpol to be on the lookout for Bruno. But Bruno was still in Rio de Janeiro. The police were tracking his every movement, and finally, through Wi-Fi signal location, Bruno's location was found. He was taking refuge in a building in the south zone of Rio de Janeiro. And finally, on June 15th, after the detectives kept tabs on him in the same location, Bruno was arrested for Jeff's murder. Both Bruno and Vinicius were charged with homicide and concealment of a corpse, to which both of them pleaded not guilty. As of present, the trial of Bruno and Vinicius began on October 27, 2023, and 18 people were summoned as witnesses, including Jeff's mom, Maria, and brother, Diego. According to the prosecution, Jeff had initially paid Bruno a little over $3,000 for the supposed acting contract. But Jeff didn't know that Bruno no longer worked for that production company, as mentioned. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, though, but it's usually the production company who pays the actor, not the other way around. This was the first sign of this being a scam. But anyway, Jeff got restless after a lot of time had passed, and he didn't hear back from anyone pertaining to this supposed new role. That was when Jeff called Bruno to his home, Vinicius already being there, and he confronted him, and a fight ensued. Bruno gained the upper hand and overpowered Jeff by hitting him on the head, and he ultimately strangled him to death with a telephone cord, tragically ending his life. According to Vinicius, Bruno was the one who carried out the attack, and he was only pressured into helping him hide the body. That was when the pair decided to hide Jeff in a chest in his home, and then he was buried near Bruno's rental home 12 miles away. Bruno took Jeff's phone, credit card, and car keys, and continued to text Jeff's family, pretending to be him as to raise no suspicion. To add to that, multiple transactions were made by Jeff's credit card following the murder. The first transaction was $22 on January 23rd, the day that Jeff last talked to his family. The second transaction was $680 2 days later, and on that same day, a third transaction was made in 2 installments of $750. Lastly, a 3-installment transaction of $1,063 was made on January 26th. In total, Bruno spent thousands of dollars of Jeff's money after ending Jeff's life. I mean, murdering someone's heartless enough, but using the victim's money after their death is just something else. According to Bruno's statement, he went to Jeff's house with another unnamed person who wasn't Vinicius, and even showered there. When he came out of the bathroom 15 minutes later, he found Jeff lifeless on the bed with a cord around his neck. According to Bruno, it was this third person who killed Jeff. But why? Well, because the mystery man accused Jeff of spreading a sexually transmitted infection. All this aside, though, as of now, the final verdict has not been reached, but it seems pretty cut and dry. Bruno and Vinicius are likely the ones who ended Jeff's life, and the reason was just money. Some speculate that drug dealers are also involved in this, and Bruno had scammed so many people because he owed money to a dealer and couldn't come up with any other way to pay his debt. But this is all an assumption, and no one can say for sure. In the end, an innocent person lost his life, truly believing that he would soon be getting his dream role in a soap opera. To deceive someone, that's bad enough. But to con someone into believing that their life's dream is about to come true, that's just sick. It's just so heartbreaking to think of what Jeff's final moments were like. He invited Bruno into his home, he trusted him, he gave money to Bruno, but everything was a deceitful lie, and in the end, Jeff paid the price for resisting with his life. To add to that, Vinicius, someone who Jeff knew and was close to, turned out to be an accomplice in his murder. Everyone in Brazil, as well as the rest of the world, is waiting on the verdict. We can only hope that Jeff's family can get the closure and the peace they need to finally move on from this heavy loss. But I, for one, will just come out and say it. Waiting on the verdict is more or less a waste of time. We all know good and well who's to blame for this crime, and they're already in police custody. Jeff was more than just an actor. He was a person who wanted to make his dreams come true. And it's so tragic that his final moments were nothing short of a nightmare. Scams often sound too good to be true because they are. The worst part about scams is that they often prey on the most vulnerable of people. Jeff was a man who so desperately wanted to achieve his dreams. And when a trusted friend came out of the woodwork and offered him the role of a lifetime, obviously he accepted, and who wouldn't? But sometimes, even the people we trust the most, well, they may not be worthy of that trust. Thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of True Crime Stories. I wanted to give a special thank you to a couple channel members, including Misty in Town and Cassie Adams. And Cassie's been a member for over 4 years, so a huge thank you to you, Cassie. If you also want to become a member of the channel, you gain access to new videos sometimes days or weeks before they're uploaded to the public. And it's currently the best way you can help support the channel and help out. And I really appreciate those of you who have decided to do that. If you want to join, you can click that big join button below the video, or find the link down in the description. But as always, if you enjoyed this video, check out this other interesting case I covered, and don't forget to subscribe. It's totally free and keeps you up to date with all of my future videos. But my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.